Hello, folks. This just is an update to let people know what's going on regarding a documentary this weekend, the 16th of November, on Anderson Cooper. It's a documentary by CNN, and they wanted to talk about refugees and the situation in South Africa in advance of the G20 summit taking place in South Africa.
We've come to South Africa to try to find the white genocide Trump keeps talking about.
Several months ago, I was kindly and politely contacted by CNN to see if I'd be interested in being part of that documentary. Now, to be fair to CNN, they flew me down to Alabama and they paid for my lodging. So thank you very much to CNN for that. I was a little cautious because of the reporting that CNN does isn't oftentimes unreliable. But the producer approached me in a manner that made it sound like the CNN was interested in reporting a true story about South Africa. And therefore I gave it a chance. Now, some people say that the only reason they wanted me there is because they wanted access to refugees, and Earl Langton lives in Birmingham, and I had contact with Earl, and they want access. Well, I asked Earl if he was willing to do it, and they had already contacted him, and after speaking to me, he said he was willing to do it. So I don't know what the agenda was, and I'm not trying to attribute any false agendas to CNN. They legitimately asked me to come down to be interviewed. When I went down there, I met the producer, fantastic gentleman, and very straightforward, and then later met the cameraman and the on-air personality, an Irish gentleman. Now, the Irish gentleman made some comments that made me a little concerned about his objectivity, but I stayed open-minded. We went to interview Earl Langton, and the CNN journalist interviewed him for like an hour and 45 minutes. It was only supposed to be 45 minutes to an hour. It was an hour and 45 minutes at least, if I recall correctly. And then it was time to interview me. Okay. So we went to some local community nearby, and we went to a school. There was some generator or a lawnmower or something running, which was very distracting. They wired me up for the conversation. We sat down under an overhang for a picnic table, and it was rather rushed. He asked me some questions, and I left there with the sense that I would not be in the documentary. And you might say, why would you not be in the documentary? Well, for starters, the Irish journalist kept asking me questions, trying to get me to blame Donald Trump, or essentially, that's my take on it, to say that Trump is wrong to allow South Africans to come over. Also, the focus is on whites and Afrikaners, but that's not who the program is for. The program is not a farmer program. The program is not an Afrikaner program. It is not a white program. It is for racial minorities suffering from unjust persecution, and it's governed by the 1980 Immigration and Nationality Act, a law that was passed under a Democratic-led government under James Earl Carter, and one which has brought 2.9 million or 2.6 million refugees into this country from around the world, the vast majority of them people of color. So I'm not going to sit there and give a person the answer they want just to be in a documentary. Now, I contacted CNN earlier this week to find out what the status of the documentary was. Is it still going forward? And I was kindly informed that it is going forward, but unfortunately, I didn't make the cutting room floor. I've just watched the promo, the trailer from CNN for this, and they're talking about white genocide. Again, this is a topic that politicians in South Africa and that the media in South Africa and U.S. media, like CNN, are perpetuating. When asked the question directly by Annika Larson in the White House whether he still believed there was a white genocide with President Ramaphosa in the room, President Trump said, "I'm not convinced of that." Trump is not the one running around screaming white genocide. South African politicians, the media, and based on this promo, CNN are the ones doing it. The fact that I won't be in the documentary doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I'm grateful to CNN for being objective in the conversation. Now, what makes the cutting room floor with Earl Langton, we'll see. But I overheard the interview. It was a decent interview. Now, the Irish journalist probed a few times, and that's fine. Journalists are allowed to do that and ask questions that are pointed.
Is there a white genocide in South Africa?
I feel that's a little bit of a loaded question.
You know, it was an objective, largely objective interview. We'll see how it comes out in the documentary. But I wasn't going to sit there and tell people what they want to hear. I tell them the truth. So I'm not in the documentary, and my feelings aren't hurt. In fact, it's probably just as well. This documentary probably won't be viewed very positively by a lot of South Africans, so maybe I've dodged a bullet in not being part of their documentary. I don't know. We'll see. I'll be watching Anderson Cooper, a program I've never watched in my life because I find him quite annoying and pedantic. But I'll be watching it Sunday just to see what comes out. So maybe you want to watch it too. The fact that they're talking about a white genocide is a little bit disturbing because the people who are suffering from unjust racial persecution aren't calling it a white genocide. AfriForum is not calling it a white genocide. Solidarity is not calling it a white genocide. Most people aren't calling it that. But the politicians in South Africa, the media, and now apparently CNN are calling it a white genocide. Whatever the case, Like I said, maybe I dodged a bullet. But in the end, that's fine with me. It was an interesting experience working with CNN, and also it gave me an opportunity to meet Earl Langton and Jay and their families in person and interview them. Now, as a professional independent journalist, I went down there on their dime, and I asked the producer, I said, do you mind? I intend to interview these guys while I'm down. Do you mind if I interview them, if I release it in advance of your documentary? And they said, fine. There's no problem with that. But see, that's what professionals do. And they were courteous to me to tell me that I'm not in the documentary. So there you go. I'll thank them for the professionalism. Will this be an objective documentary based on the promo, the trailer? I have my doubts. So anyway, folks, CNN this Sunday, the 16th of November is when it's supposed to air. And let's see how they portray Donald Trump. Let's see how they portray America. Let's see how they portray those suffering from unjust racial persecution. More to follow. Stay tuned. Cheers.